Have you ever noticed something strange? The moment you're struggling, the room becomes quieter. Messages stop coming, promises disappear. People who once called themselves your friends suddenly become too busy. It's one of the most painful experiences a person can face, not because you're alone, but because you finally discover who was never really with you. Machiavelli observed something uncomfortable about human nature centuries ago. People often stay close when your success benefits them. When the benefits disappear, many relationships are tested. That realization hurts. But it can also become the beginning of your greatest transformation. Before we begin, write this affirmation in the comments. I become stronger when I stand on my own. Not for me, for yourself. Because today isn't about feeling abandoned. It's about discovering the strength that only solitude can reveal. Most people spend their lives believing that success depends on finding the right people, the right mentor, the right friends, the right partner, the right team. We are taught that if enough people believe in us, encourage us, and stand beside us, we will eventually become unstoppable. While support is valuable, it is also temporary. People's priorities change. Circumstances shift. Those who once promised to stay may quietly disappear when life becomes inconvenient. That isn't always cruelty. Sometimes it is simply human nature. Machiavelli understood that loyalty often changes with circumstances. Many people remain close while the relationship is comfortable or mutually beneficial. But difficult seasons reveal which connections are built on genuine character and which were built only on convenience. This realization can feel devastating because it forces you to confront an uncomfortable truth. If your confidence exists only because others constantly reassure you, then your confidence never truly belonged to you. It belonged to their approval. The moment those voices fall silent, uncertainty rushes in. You begin questioning your abilities, your purpose, even your worth. But that painful silence can become one of the greatest gifts life ever gives you. It removes the illusion that your future depends entirely on someone else's belief. For the first time, you are forced to ask a different question. Not who will help me succeed, but who am I when nobody is watching, encouraging, or applauding? That question changes everything. Because real strength is not built when everyone stands beside you. It is built when you continue moving forward after realizing that no one is coming to carry you. And once you learn to trust yourself more than the opinions of others, you gain something that can no longer be taken away. Loneliness has a way of revealing truths that constant company often hides. When the noise of other people's opinions fades, you are left alone with your own mind. At first, that silence can feel unbearable. Without messages to answer, conversations to distract you, or familiar faces to reassure you, every insecurity seems louder than before. You begin questioning whether you are good enough, whether you made the right choices, or whether the people who walked away were right about you. Most people try to escape this discomfort as quickly as possible, because facing yourself is often harder than facing the world. But if you stay with that silence instead of running from it, something remarkable begins to happen. You start separating your own voice from the expectations that others placed upon you. You notice how many decisions were made simply to gain approval, avoid criticism, or fit into someone else's idea of success. What once felt like confidence is exposed as dependence on validation. And once you recognize that pattern, you finally have the chance to break it. Machiavelli understood that difficult circumstances reveal character more clearly than comfortable ones. When support disappears, appearances no longer matter. What remains is discipline, judgment, and the ability to continue despite uncertainty. Every promise you keep to yourself becomes proof that your identity does not depend on applause. Every small act of consistency becomes another brick in a foundation that cannot be shaken by rejection or praise. Slowly, you stop measuring your worth by who stays or who leaves. Instead, you measure it by your willingness to keep moving forward, even when no one is watching. In that moment, the loneliness stops feeling like punishment and begins to feel like a teacher, showing you a version of yourself that could never have emerged while you were surrounded by constant reassurance. One of the greatest traps after being rejected, ignored, or abandoned is the overwhelming desire to prove everyone wrong. You imagine the day they finally notice your success, regret leaving, or wish they had believed in you. It feels motivating at first, but beneath that motivation lies a dangerous truth. You are still allowing other people to control the direction of your life. Every achievement becomes a performance for an audience that has already walked away. Your happiness remains tied to their reaction instead of your own growth. Machiavelli understood that people are often driven by appearances and shifting interests. If you spend your life chasing the approval of others, you will constantly adjust yourself to satisfy expectations that never stop changing. Today's praise can become tomorrow's criticism, and those who celebrate you now may abandon you later if circumstances change. Building your identity on such an unstable foundation guarantees disappointment. Instead of asking, "How do I make them admire me?" ask yourself a far more powerful question. Who am I becoming through this experience? That single shift changes everything. Your focus moves away from revenge and toward transformation. You stop measuring success by applause and begin measuring it by discipline, integrity, and steady progress. Every book you finish, every skill you develop, every promise you keep to yourself becomes meaningful, even if nobody else ever notices. The irony is that people often respect those who no longer seek constant validation. Quiet confidence is difficult to imitate because it comes from within, not from external approval. When you no longer need permission to pursue your goals, criticism loses much of its power, and praise becomes a welcome bonus rather than a necessity. Real freedom begins the moment your decisions are guided by your principles instead of other people's opinions. That is the kind of strength that remains, even when the crowd disappears and no one is left to applaud. The world celebrates visible victories, but rarely notices the invisible work that creates them. People admire the promotion, the successful business, the strong body, or the calm confidence. Yet they almost never see the countless ordinary moments that made those achievements possible. They don't see the early mornings when no one was watching, the difficult choices that required self-control, or the days when progress felt so small it was almost impossible to measure. Quiet strength is built in those unnoticed moments, not in the spotlight. Machiavelli recognized that lasting success depends less on grand gestures and more on preparation, discipline, and the ability to adapt before circumstances force you to. Waiting until life becomes difficult is already too late. The person who appears unshaken during a crisis is usually the one who prepared long before anyone else recognized the danger. Their confidence is not an act. It is the result of repeated actions that strengthen their character over time. Every disciplined choice, no matter how small, becomes an investment in your future self. Reading instead of endlessly scrolling, learning a valuable skill instead of complaining about missed opportunities, exercising when motivation disappears, saving money instead of chasing temporary pleasures, finishing what you started even when excitement has faded. None of these decisions seem extraordinary on their own, but together, they create a person who becomes increasingly difficult to discourage. This kind of strength does not demand attention or seek applause. It grows quietly, almost unnoticed, until one day the results become impossible to ignore. Others may call it luck or natural talent because they only witness the outcome, never the process. But you know the truth. Every moment you chose discipline over comfort added another layer to your foundation. And when life inevitably tests you again, you won't depend on hope alone. You'll rely on habits, character, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing you've already overcome yourself countless times before facing the world. When everyone leaves, the silence can feel overwhelming. The routines that once revolved around other people suddenly disappear, and the empty space they leave behind can seem impossible to fill. Most people rush to escape that feeling. They distract themselves with endless entertainment, surround themselves with noise, or desperately search for new relationships just to avoid being alone with their own thoughts. But in doing so, they miss one of life's greatest opportunities. Solitude is uncomfortable, precisely because it forces you to confront the parts of yourself that constant distraction keeps hidden. Machiavelli understood that adversity has a way of revealing what comfort conceals. When external support disappears, you are no longer able to rely on borrowed confidence or familiar routines. Instead, you are invited to examine your own mind with honesty. What do you truly value? Which goals belong to you, and which were chosen simply to impress others? What fears have been quietly directing your decisions without you even realizing it? These are difficult questions, but they are also the questions that shape a meaningful life. Solitude becomes a teacher when you stop treating it as an enemy. Instead of asking, "Why am I alone?" begin asking, "What is this season trying to teach me?" That simple shift changes isolation into reflection. The quiet hours become an opportunity to learn new skills, strengthen your character, and develop the emotional resilience that cannot be borrowed from anyone else. Little by little, your relationship with yourself begins to change. You stop fearing your own company because you discover that you are capable of guiding yourself through uncertainty. Eventually, you realize that being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. Loneliness is the feeling of something missing, but solitude is the choice to use that space for growth. One drains your spirit, while the other strengthens it. And when you emerge from that season, you carry with you something far more valuable than temporary companionship. You carry clarity, self-respect, and an inner stability that remains steady regardless of who comes into your life or who chooses to leave it. As you grow, something unexpected begins to happen. The relationships around you start to change. At first, you may assume that success will bring everyone closer, that your progress will inspire the people who once knew you. But life rarely unfolds that way. Growth has a strange way of revealing the true nature of every relationship. Some people will celebrate your victories as if they were their own. They will encourage you, challenge you to become even better, and remain beside you whether you succeed or fail. Others, however, may become distant. Not because you have done something wrong, but because your growth reminds them of the changes they have been unwilling or unable to make in their own lives. Machiavelli observed that people's loyalties and attitudes are often shaped by changing circumstances. That does not mean everyone is dishonest or selfish, but it does mean relationships are rarely immune to ambition, fear, envy, or shifting priorities. Someone who applauded your dreams when they seemed harmless may react differently once those dreams begin to become reality. The version of you they were comfortable with no longer exists, and not everyone is willing to adjust to the person you are becoming. This is where many people make a costly mistake. They shrink themselves to preserve relationships that were built around an older version of who they were. They stop pursuing opportunities, hide their achievements, or apologize for their ambition simply to avoid making others uncomfortable. In the process, they trade long-term fulfillment for temporary acceptance. But genuine relationships do not require you to become smaller in order to keep them alive. The people who truly care about you may not understand every decision you make, but they will respect your commitment to becoming your best self. That does not mean responding with arrogance or looking down on those whose paths are different from yours. Real strength does not need to announce itself. It remains calm, respectful, and grounded. There is no need to seek revenge against those who doubted you or to prove your worth through constant comparison. The greatest response to disbelief is not humiliation of others, but quiet consistency. Let your actions speak more loudly than your arguments ever could. As your life changes, your circle may become smaller, but smaller does not always mean worse. A handful of trustworthy people who value honesty, mutual respect, and growth is often more valuable than a crowd held together only by convenience or shared comfort. Learn to appreciate those who remain, forgive those who choose a different path, and release the need to make everyone understand your journey. Not every relationship is meant to last forever, and not every goodbye is a failure. Some departures simply create the space needed for new opportunities, stronger connections, and a wiser version of yourself to emerge. In the end, success is measured not by how many people stand behind you, but by whether you can continue walking forward with integrity, even if the path becomes quieter than you ever expected. If everyone has left you, it may feel like you've reached the end of your story. The silence can convince you that you were never good enough, that your dreams were unrealistic, or that your future disappeared the moment the people you trusted walked away. Those thoughts are powerful because they arrive when you're emotionally exhausted. But they are not facts. They are simply the voice of fear trying to define your future before you've had the chance to write it yourself. Machiavelli understood that life is unpredictable. Fortune rises and falls, circumstances change without warning, and the support people offer today may not exist tomorrow. Because of that, he believed a person should cultivate the qualities they can control: good judgment, courage, adaptability, and the discipline to act wisely even when the situation is uncertain. Those qualities cannot guarantee an easy life, but they make you far more capable of meeting whatever life places in your path. Think back to the moment you realized no one was coming to rescue you. It probably felt like one of the darkest moments of your life. Yet, hidden inside, that realization was a powerful truth. The moment you stop waiting for someone else to change your life is often the moment you begin changing it yourself. You stop postponing your goals until the perfect opportunity appears. You stop expecting constant encouragement before taking action. You stop believing that your future depends on someone else's approval. Instead, you begin building a life one decision at a time, knowing that even small, consistent actions can transform your direction over months and years. The people who eventually achieve meaningful success are rarely the ones who never experienced loneliness, rejection, or disappointment. More often, they are the ones who refuse to let those experiences become permanent identities. They understood that being rejected does not make you unworthy. Being alone does not make you weak. Losing support does not mean losing potential. Every setback became another opportunity to develop patience, resilience, and a clearer understanding of who they wanted to become. One day, if you remain consistent, your circumstances may look completely different. New opportunities will appear. New relationships will form. People who never believed in you may suddenly admire your progress. Some may even act as though they supported you from the very beginning. When that day comes, remember the lessons that solitude taught you. Stay humble in success, just as you remain determined in hardship. Never allow praise to inflate your ego any more than criticism once diminished your confidence. Build your identity on your values, not on changing opinions. And perhaps the greatest lesson of all is this: your worth has never been determined by the number of people standing beside you. Crowds can cheer today and disappear tomorrow. Friends can change. Circumstances can shift. Fortune can rise and fall. But the relationship you build with yourself is the one companion that follows you through every chapter of your life. Invest in that relationship. Keep the promises you make to yourself. Protect your integrity. Continue learning. Continue improving. Continue moving, even when progress feels invisible. Remember the affirmation you wrote at the beginning of this video. I become stronger when I stand on my own. Read those words again, but this time don't see them as empty motivation. See them as a commitment, a reminder that your strength does not come from having perfect conditions or endless support. It comes from your willingness to keep taking the next step, even when the road is uncertain. If this message reached you during a difficult season, let it serve as proof that this chapter does not define the rest of your life. Every person who has ever built something meaningful has faced moments when the path ahead looked empty. The difference was not that they never doubted themselves. The difference was that they kept moving despite those doubts. So don't measure this season by what you've lost. Measure it by what you're becoming. Let the silence sharpen your focus instead of breaking your spirit. Let rejection strengthen your resolve instead of diminishing your confidence. Let solitude teach you lessons that comfort never could. Because one day, you'll look back on this period, not as the time everyone left you, but as the moment you finally discovered that the most reliable person you could ever depend on was the person staring back at you in the mirror. And once you truly understand that, no setback, no rejection, and no absence of support will ever have the power to stop you from moving toward the life you're determined to create. So if you are currently walking through a season where you feel alone, remember this: being alone is not the same as being defeated. A person with determination, self-belief, and the willingness to keep improving can rebuild from almost any situation. The absence of support does not mean the absence of possibility. Sometimes the foundation of your greatest transformation is built during the very moments when nobody else can see your progress. Now, take a moment and write this affirmation in the comments. I do not need everyone beside me to move forward. I trust myself. I believe in my path. And I have the strength to continue. Write it not only for others to see, but as a reminder to yourself, because every time you choose to believe in yourself despite uncertainty, you become stronger.